Dan, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Nate. Appreciate being on.
Absolutely. Well, your wealth of knowledge in the space of employment and different types of people who are working in organizations is so invaluable, especially today. And you and I know the importance of the right fit, the right people in your organization that fit your culture, that fit your commitment to excellence and really the experience that we're attempting to create. And I think, there's all different kinds of stereotypes that we have in the workplace. And one stereotype that is kind of the elephant in the room today is, what do we do? What do we do with those individuals who are seasoned yet are maybe exiting the workplace in the next 5, 10, 15 years? And employers may, of course, we can't discriminate, right? We can't discriminate against.
Well, at
age.
least not on paper, we can't.
Not on paper, but does it really happen? Does it happen?
It does happen. Unfortunately, when you look at the age of somebody who has a lot of experience, the business owner looks at that and says, well, if this person's only going to be here, let's say another 5 years, do I want somebody there that I have to pay a premium for, or can I get somebody who's going to be around for 20 years and I can pay maybe half as much? Now, here's the ridiculousness of that discussion. Right now, I think the average length of time a person stays in their job is 2 to 3 years. So if you're looking for a candidate that you're saying you're going to keep for 20 years, the reality of that happening is pretty small. It just isn't going to be there. So what you're passing on somebody who has a wealth of knowledge, who can also train up some of the people that you have on your staff that maybe need that level of experience or need that level of coaching that they aren't going to get from somebody who's closer to being their peer age. And that's, often what I've had clients I've had this discussion with. Fortunately, most of my clients have a good workplace culture and they value the knowledge over the age. But it is a consideration that I think many business owners look at because they don't like hiring. They don't like hiring. They don't like firing. That's just the nature of the beast. At the same point, we have a lot of these experienced people, and I think caused by a number of environmental factors, we'll say, that have happened over the last 10 to 15 years, have now decided that, well, my retirement package is good enough, or I have enough in my 401k, or I have enough in the stock market that I can comfortably step back or step out of the workforce, and I don't have to deal with this stuff anymore. And that's what we're also seeing is they're voluntarily leaving because they don't want to put up with it. We're dealing with generational issues. We're dealing with payment issues. We're dealing with ageism to some degree. And all these factors just kind of come together and these folks decide that it's not where I want to be anymore. Yeah.
The ageism piece. And you touched on some important pieces of this experience. One, sometimes, we'll look at someone who perhaps is, what are we talking? Baby boomers and late Gen Xers, right? Hey, I don't even know. I'm a Gen Xer. And I'm like, oh my goodness.
You and I both. And we're kind of getting to that stage where now we start thinking about, are we going to stay in the workforce? Or are we going to leave?
Are we still relevant? Right.
Yes.
So one thing that comes to mind is our vantage point when we come to human capital, I guess you'd call it. It's a very sterile term, but the value of the people in an organization. And sometimes when we look at people who are seasoned citizens, right, we tend to check off some boxes and say, well, are they acclimated with technology, and are they going to be able to keep up with change, and are they able to perhaps set aside some of the old ways, right? Things like hey, look, let's just call it what it is. Will they be sick? Will they be going to get the hip replacement, all this other stuff? And they're not. I mean, let's just call it what it is, right? These are questions that they're logical questions that we would ask. And I don't think that it's wrong to ask those questions. However, sometimes we're not asking the right questions. And I think some of the other questions we should be asking are, do I have a breadth of experience and wisdom in my organization? Because when someone comes in, and let's throw some age ranges out there in the upper spectrum, what are we talking here as far as the ages?
I mean, in most cases, you're probably looking at early to mid 60s is kind of what I would say the sweet spot. But I could also share an example that hits pretty close to my home. My mother, she's 76. She's still working, partially because she needs to, and the other part is I think she would go insane if she didn't do something outside the house. Now she's to point to some of that technology stuff. Is she the best with technology? Can she learn it? Yes, she can. She's been in front of a computer for the last 30, 40 years. So she knows most of it. Getting into the weeds, that's a little bit different. You need to help her with that. But she's actually working for a biosciences company here in Wisconsin. And she's had some really good success with what she's doing. Is she doing the technical stuff? No. But what she's doing is she's following up with doctors' offices, with patients to make sure that the procedure they're going through, they have the right information, and she's doing a lot of the dotting the I's and crossing the T's, which, if you know my mother, that's her sweet spot. She's got a unique talent of making sure everything is done to perfection. In fact, she just, I recently published an ebook, and she was the one who went through and checked every I and dotted every T and made sure there were 2 periods and stuff like that. So when we're looking at the workforce, whether it's somebody who's 60, 65, all the way up to 70s, 80s, I think we're missing a huge opportunity if we're not looking at the skills and talents that they bring to the table and where they fill gaps that maybe a younger generation wouldn't.
Yeah, indeed. And to the story about your mom, first of all, I love that. I wonder if it's okay to share, was it a journey to get to that? Were a lot of doors closed? I mean, when you hear that, 76 years old, right? I mean, we're pushing almost 80, and we're not talking about working as a greeter at Walmart. These are, these are office positions. Mm-hmm. Was it tough getting there?
She has a lot of advantages to her. So you brought up health. As you get older, you tend to get sicker. You tend to have more chronic illnesses pop up. It's just the nature of getting old. She's fit as a fiddle. She's probably going to live to be 140. I keep teasing her about that. So there's a lot of things going in her favor. But I will say this. She was the executive assistant to a CEO at an insurance company for a number of years. And when that insurance company got bought out, merged with another one, of course, that CEO was already getting ready for retirement. He left. They made changes, and she was let go in her position. She couldn't find anything else after that. Because, again, nobody wants to hire somebody who's in their mid to late 60s, approaching 70, that they figure is probably a year or two going to retire anyway. So they didn't ask the questions. They made assumptions and didn't really get into an understanding of why she likes to work, what she wants to do, and see if there is an opportunity to put her there. They were also looking at her salary at that point because she had been there for several years. She was quite experienced. She was managing everything from events to multiple leadership calendars and meetings and coordinating all that stuff. And she was making good money.
Yeah.
It's hard to let that go. At the same point, though, they're looking at the bottom line going, well, there's a salary we can free up and we can plug a 30-something into that same position, and we'll keep our fingers crossed they can do as well. But they'll do it for half the money. So we see a lot of that. Yeah,
we see a lot of that. And so what I'm hearing is, if you're listening and you're in that age range, don't give up. The right fit. Who values your expertise, your experience, your wisdom, will as long as you continue to look for that best fit.
I think the key to that too is, as you start approaching that age, you have to look at how you market yourself. It's not going to be as much off a resume. It's going to be off of what do you bring to the table that somebody else isn't going to. You need to get them to look beyond that age point to say, this is why you need to hire me. This is what I'm going to bring to the table that another person might not bring. And here's the experience you gain over somebody who's quite a bit younger than me.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I'm not here personally. I love bringing on folks with lots of experience, lots of wisdom, lots of anecdotes that are maybe lost to history. And it adds such a richness, at least to our culture and our environment. I have no problem at all hiring folks who are older. In fact, I've been encouraged recently. I need to bring the median age down because now. And that said, that's a good point to make too, because the breadth of, as I had mentioned earlier, of experience and exposure and different elements to the diversity of ideas is important too. Because if you've got a company that's weighted very heavily on an emerging generation, say, 20s to 30s, you're going to have a different understanding, different sort of meter, a different philosophy, if you will, based on that generation. Every generation has its sort of hallmarks, right? Mm-hmm. That's not universal, but there are hallmarks in every generation because there's generational experiences. You and I didn't grow up with pandemics when we were young. We grew up with Saturday morning cartoons. And so cereal and banquet TV dinners. And so, we lived in a different era that had mostly a lot of absentee parents who were, parents who were working. And so you were raised by your sitcoms and your microwave dinners, right? So this was a different era than today. And I wonder how even we survived all of this food that was being microwaved. My son's like,
well, I think there was probably less chemicals in the food even back then than there probably are today. So I think there's a lot more preservatives.
Good point.
But yeah, we definitely were, they always use the phrase latchkey kids. Now I grew up in a rural area. I actually grew up on a dairy farm. So work for me started at pretty much as soon as I could get out of the house and walk around, from doing simple chores to, eventually when you get into high school, actually doing things like baling hay, milking cows, driving heavy equipment. There's a lot of experience you gain from that. And also, if you look at our culture, we had a lot more people that were ag-based 30, 40 years ago. Now we look at our culture and, even my kids, they grew up in an urban set or semi-urban setting. We're not in a huge city, but we're in a good sized town. They don't have chores like I had. In fact, trying to get them to do chores in and around the house sometimes was difficult because, when you're asking a kid to clean up his room and that's the most they've got to do, that's a lot different than when, hey, you have animals that require your care. If you don't take care of them, they're going to get sick and they're going to die. And that's also how we make money and put food on the table. So, there was a lot more importance, I think, into what we do. We've also become a nation where, I think this is true of every parent, you want your children to have a better life than what you had. Well, in the process of doing that, you tend to do a lot more for them. They get a lot more perks and bennies than maybe, we did back in the day, because maybe our parents weren't making as much, or, again, different lifestyles, all that plays into effect. So yeah, there is a huge difference in, especially the last couple generations, I think, with, most of them raised in sports, soccer mom kids or whatever it might be. And they're used to getting that support, that praise, that coaching, that level of experience. And then they get in the workforce and it's kind of like, well, sit at your desk and figure this out, because we're not going to spend any time training you because your manager, your boss is busy doing his job as well, or her job as well. And I think that's where we're really missing out on this experience, in that we're losing a lot of knowledge that just isn't being shared because A, they're retiring, and B, we just haven't set up the workplace to support the generations that are looking for that coaching or that experience or that knowledge coming in. And that's a huge opportunity that we're losing out on.
Yeah, no doubt. And so I think that's so important to identify these generational differences that you're talking about, whether it's you're bringing in the younger Gen Zers coming into the workplace, or Y Gen, and of course you've got the millennials and Gen X and baby boomers are really signify the swath, if you will, of the workplace. And I think we would be doing a disservice as leaders not to understand some of the underpinnings. Again, it's not universal, but there are some generational underpinnings that you're describing that help us to foster a more productive and meaningful environment where people can find greater satisfaction and fulfillment contribution in their work. So it's so incumbent upon us, if we haven't begin to do the homework and the research of really just being able to better understand some of the nuances that undergird each generation's sort of need, if you will, in the workplace, because there are some contrasts, as you said. For Gen Xers, I remember, and I know it's a cliche for a reason, but come home when it's dark, right? Man, we would ride our bicycles all over town, Dan, and it was just normal. And sometimes you'd be solo, and you're like, oh boy, where am I? Where did I end up? And of course, back then, this, we didn't have cell phones.
No,
we didn't have GPS. We didn't have any way to figure. We had to figure it out. What did that mean? Okay, that means, hey, you stop at if you're on your bicycle, you stop at a local gas station or a grocery store and say, hey, I'm lost. I need to get back to this street because I got to get home before dark, or otherwise I'm in trouble. Oh, here's what you do, kid. You do this and this and this, right? That was a hallmark, if you will, at least in the United States, of our generation of. You just figure, well, that's just, hey, that doesn't apply to every single generation.
No,
you have to identify that.
Yeah, that's where things, I think, have really changed. Is we, when you and I were kids, we had to entertain ourselves. We had to figure out. If I asked my mom, or if I asked my dad, probably better example. If I said I was bored, he definitely would find something for me to do, and it was something I probably didn't want to do. There's always more chores on the farm.
Don't tell your dad.
So you don't ask your mom or dad back then. I'm bored. I don't know what to do. Kids nowadays, they've got technology. We've got more on TV. We've got more on entertainment. We're sitting here recording this on a computer and sharing information back and forth that way. They've got video games. I mean, I had an Atari video game that I played to death when I was a kid, but that was a relatively new thing. Now you have internet and you have everything on your phone, and you can do a world of stuff. And then there's also YouTube, there's Facebook, there's X, there's TikTok, there's all these different social media channels that can kind of perpetuate something to keep I won't say keep your mind necessarily active, but keep your mind busy. And we didn't have that back then. So if you got bored, you had to go figure out something to do. I lived in the country, hunting and fishing. It was nothing to get up early in the morning and go out and go hunting, or hop on the bike and grab the pole and go 2 miles down the road to the nearest creek so I could put a pole in the water. Kids today really, for the most part, don't think about doing that. They'll turn on their phone and turn on their social media, and that's what captivates their attention now. So you lose, to some degree, some of that creativity. Now, it's not with everybody, because some people make pretty good money online being creative. But most of us are ingesting that information. We're not giving that information. So it's something that I do believe younger generations really have to learn, is how to tap into that creative part of their brain. And the best way to do that, if effectively done, is, have some more experienced people, some people that have been there, done that for the last 20, 30 years, to challenge them, to push them, to give them purpose and meaning in their work. So that way, whether they stay or whether they leave, you have a situation where that person's better going out than they were coming in. And that's ultimately what any leader should prescribe to do, is really, leave it better than you found it. So if somebody's coming in, they're lacking knowledge, how are you implanting that knowledge? How are you putting together a career path for that individual? Because most companies don't spend any time doing that. Most companies do an evaluation once a year, and that's typically merit-based. It's not on how do I improve this person's, cognitive knowledge of the job, their experience level, give them challenges that will not only help my company, but help them grow in their position and potentially help keep them around. And that's why we see the turnover that we do. We as leaders need to make more of an effort to invest in that. At the same time, the employees coming in also have to understand that they can't be CEO on day one. They have to develop that experience that's going to be necessary for when they do eventually get to that level, being successful in the role that they're in.
Yeah, that's so well said. And so when I think about what you're saying, I'm seeing a 25-year-old, a 45-year-old, and a 65-year-old all working in the same organization. And of course, each of them come from, generally speaking, a different generation. And they each one may view a challenge, a problem, a task differently than one another. And I think it's incumbent, again, up to us as leaders to foster an environment where we can help them to solve those problems in their own language, their generational language. At the same time, recognizing the overlap in each generation in an ability to help one another to overcome situations. The 25-year-old may have better technological skills to help the 65-year-old, and so on. And the 45-year-old may bridge some gaps between the two generations in terms of how we communicate, how to work as a team effectively, and in some ways cohesively and also autonomously, and bridge those gaps.
Yeah, what should bring us together sometimes pushes us apart, though, right? Because each of those generations, as you point out, have different experiences, different needs, different abilities, and we all have the stereotypes, right? We all think something about a millennial or a Gen X, and they all think something about a baby boomer. For whatever reason, Gen X often gets skipped when it's the younger to the older. But we all seem to we have our different levels of experience. Now, the Gen Xers, because we can both speak from that, we're of that age. We were the latchkey kids. The baby boomers were the first generation after the Great Generation, so they were part of the big economic boom of the United States for 20, 30 years. We've got the millennials, where their probably biggest experiences are the last great recession. That's when most of them were probably entering the workforce. And then I look at the Gen Z, my daughter's age, their biggest experience really was 9/11, but most of them were too young to even remember that. They really haven't had to deal with much as far as a true up or down, other than the recent health pandemic that we had a few years back, and that I think even set to work, the idea that, well, we're not going to go to an office anymore. For me, I want work-life balance. I can work from home. I can do my job here. I don't need to go into an office to do that. And that's also where we're starting to see this shift, because if you look at most, or not millennials, but most Gen Xers and baby boomers, they would insist that you're in the office because they want to see you there. Now, you might not be any more productive, but they can at least see you in that seat, know that you're at work. And it's harder to do that when you're at home. You can do a lot of different things other than work when you're sitting at a desk in your house.
Well, that's a great point you make, because say, for example, you are a Gen Xer who is in management, and you have a millennial working on your team, and you have certain tasks, and your vantage point is, well, as long as they're in their seat, I can see them. Then
right.
I can feel more comfortable about the work getting done. However, that may not be the best criteria, especially for that particular age group.
Not for everybody. Now, there are some people that do work better on their own, and there's some people that need that team environment in order to actually get anything done, because there's too many other distractions around when you're at home. There again, you kind of have to weigh the good and the bad of that, and you have to kind of test the market, if you will, to see who's going to be a right fit where. I think when we look at what companies are doing nowadays, when the pandemic hit, of course, everyone went remote, and they thought this was the best thing ever. But now you're even seeing large companies like Google. I know around here, Epic Systems, which is a large healthcare technology company, they've all insisted that, hey, you need to come back to the office. We need you in here. And part of that reason is the cultural effect. So you can't build a culture if everyone's on their phone at home or on their computer at home. Teams environments typically don't do really well with that. It's fine for collaborating in some cases, but you miss that human connection. And I think human beings are group animals, if you will. So we all have to connect with somebody at some point. We can't just live on a deserted island all by ourselves and not gain something from it. So we do need that human connection at times. And now that's where we're seeing more people kind of, if possible, moving toward maybe a hybrid environment where, some days you can work from home, some days you have to come in the office. And I'm seeing companies challenging themselves with trying to figure that out, because, of course, nobody wants to be in the office on the same day of the week. So you have some people come in, well, nobody else is there. You have people come in on another day, nobody else is there. So they're still not getting the benefit of that. It's going to be interesting to see how we figure all this out, because technology is allowing us to work more remotely. Some jobs allow that, obviously, manufacturing, restaurants, some other jobs require you to be there. You can't do that remotely. But I think more of the office or white collar positions are allowing more flexibility, but it's now a challenge with developing those cultures. So that way you keep that person engaged and make them feel like they're part of a team, which is going to be something that we all have to kind of figure out as we go forward in the next 20, 30 years.
Absolutely, yeah, and we've embraced that as well, and I know some companies that we work with have the majority of their team members are remote all over the country, and a very small team local, and they've managed to create some significant strides in culture development. In fact, we had that group on our podcast, ArtSpeak, many moons ago. We'll make sure to keep that in the show notes, so if anyone wants to revisit that episode on creating a remote team that's thriving based on a set of shared values, I thought was fantastic, because we've got, our initial inclination, again, me coming from a generation of everyone being in the same vicinity, if you will, it's counterintuitive to say, oh my goodness, can a remote team work? Yes, they can. However, as you said, you have to have the right culture, the right systems in place for it to be to function. We've had some remote folks on our team, and it's so important to make sure, as you said, to be mindful and intentional about inclusiveness. Keep them included, even though they're not here for the Halloween dress up party or the in-office meeting. Make sure that they are here in spirit. You've got ways to connect with them digitally, electronically. You keep connected through meetings and so on and so forth, to make sure that they're not forgotten.
Right.
Yeah, it's so important, and also, another thing to do is, you can, every so often, everyone who's remote, you can have them come in for an annual event or some kind of way for team building and so on, remote, or do an offsite type of experience, so that there is that human connection that's in 3D. That's what I like to call it, 3D connection with your folks as well.
Yeah, I think for me, once a quarter would be perfect. If you really are that remote, there's always going to be some examples of where, maybe you have somebody who works overseas. So you have a distance workforce there that, they're doing certain functions. Yes, you need to keep them included. It's probably not realistic to fly them in unless, of course, your company culture permits that and you have the resources to pull that off. But I think if you're looking at I'll call it your local workforce, anyone, in the continental United States, maybe, that is working for your business, find ways once a quarter to get them to connect. Maybe it's a 2-day meeting at the office, or maybe it is a retreat, or some sort of team building activity, or some sort of celebration that you can do. You're right, that is very powerful. And that does help them keep connected, make them feel valued. And ultimately, that's what's going to keep them working for you as opposed to working for somebody else. Because it gets hard to give up some of those fringe benefits beyond the pay when you take good care of your people, you have a good culture. It gets a little scary to go out there when you don't know what you're going to walk into. If you know what you got, that's going to help retain the people that you want.
Absolutely. Let me ask you this, Ian.
Yeah.
When it comes to the intergenerational business, and someone listening is in that space right now, what are some of the ways that you can share in terms of getting some integration across those generations with the baby boomer, the Gen Xer, and the millennial?
Well, I mean, ultimately, putting teams together that incorporate all three of those groups is going to be helpful. I do believe there needs to be some training to go in to get past the stereotypes. Because again, we all have our preconceived notions of what each generation brings to the table, and maybe where their weaknesses are. Of course,
let's stop there for a second. So let's start with maybe a couple dispelling some of the stereotypes. I know I'll just start with Gen X.
Go ahead.
There's a stereotype out there. I'm not going to say which Gen Xers are saying this, and I don't know if this is across all generations, but Gen Xers, I've found in general, can seem to feel like they have it all together in terms of their generation. I see this all over social media. Gen Xers are tough. What have I seen that? Me at your age as a Gen Xer would have been able to beat you at every sport or everything.
Yep.
Just grit, right? That's sort of the Gen Xer aura. And right. I think we need to take a couple steps back, right? Yes, I'm a Gen Xer. Yes, some of that's true. However, it can really seem it's really condescending and in a lot of ways. It can be off-putting. Let's just call it what it is.
Yep. Well, yeah, it's definitely, again, from that whole latchkey kid mentality. We were the kids that were allowed to go out early in the morning till late at night. You come home when the lights are on. Now you hear things in the news today where I just recently heard a mom had her kid walk home from school or walk home from the store, and she got called and arrested on it. So some of these things, well, there is some truth to it. It's not for every situation. We got to be careful of that. You look at millennials. Millennials typically tend to be the first technology kids because they were the first kids that had a laptop or a computer in their room. It wasn't even a computer in their house. But nowadays we have laptops, we have phones, we have iPads, we have multiple sources of technology. So they do tend to be. They perceive themselves as more technologically advanced than, say, the Gen Xers or the Boomers. So to your point, where it gets a little derogatory there as well, these Gen Xers are never going to figure out this technology.
Right.
And that's where we're missing an opportunity. Now, Zs we're trying to figure out yet. It appears they tend to be more work-life balance. They're the, every kid gets a trophy type thing. And I think that was something that
who needs a driver's license, right?
Or who needs a driver's license?
Uber
Eats.
Eats.
I'm going through that myself. My kid was in no hurry to get his driver's license. And I'm like, why? This is freedom. This means you can go out and do stuff. They're like, I got friends.
I got friends got a car. I got freedom on a 20 by 12 screen, right?
And that too. Yeah. So yeah, it's interesting what each generation, how we perceive them. Some of it is based on fact because that's where stereotypes come from, but also there's a lot more nuance there that goes on. And if you are not taking the time to break down the stereotypes and focusing on what's the unique talents this person brings to the table, maybe it is technology. Maybe there is something that they know about technology that, say, you don't. How as an older, more experienced person can tap into that. Vice versa. That millennial or that Gen Zer should be looking at the older person and say, this guy or gal has a wealth of knowledge. They've been around the block a couple times. Maybe if I ask them some questions, they could explain to me, why do you do things this way versus that? Or when this happens, why is this always the outcome? Because maybe they understand something at a different level that, again, only experience will bring to the table. And the same is true for each generation. So we've got to look back and forth and say, where is the unique fit? Where is that talent? And open up our minds to say, I need to understand how we can work together better, not what separates us and sets us apart negatively. And that's how you create, a good workplace environment. So bringing those people together in a group, working on a unified challenge or problem can be very helpful. I think it also is taking into the fact team environments where you can do certain activities for team building so people can share their different talents so you can see how that all works together. But we have to be more inquisitive. We can't just make assumptions about everything, and humans are very good about assuming without fully understanding what the problem or what the issue is from another person's perspective. So we've got to be smarter about that. And that's true for any generation. I don't think it's limited to Gen Xers or millennials or baby boomers, whatever it might be.
Yeah, that I agree. That's an important way to describe this this exchange, if you will, with being inquisitive. And communication defined is an exchange of ideas, and we will be more receptive to the exchange of ideas if we have an inquisitive mind, if we're curious. And where does curiosity, what does it help us to do? It helps us to recognize and admit that perhaps everything we do and every way we do it is not the most optimal. Maybe we can learn and progress. How about that for a novel concept, Dan? To learn and progress. And so if I'm a Gen Xer and a millennial saying, hey, there's a better way to do this. We can use tech to help us to solve this problem. And I say, oh, wait a minute now. We shouldn't do that. That's not the way we've always done things. Well, that's right. That's not progress. That's not inquisitive. And that's not an exchange, by the way, of ideas.
Yes. We're more comfortable making statements than we are asking questions. And I catch a lot of my clients, they're making a decision about X, for example. And I'll ask, well, did you ask them any questions? Did you try to understand what perspective they're coming from? Well, no, I'm pretty sure I know what's going on. Well, do you? Do you really? Did you ask the questions that need be? Because questions create a conversation. Statements are like a statement of fact. You pretty much made up your mind and this is what's going to be. And we all know that when we get people making statements upon us, we tend to shut down the conversations. And again, this doesn't matter what age you are. If somebody's going to tell you how it is and it's very apparent that they're not willing to listen, then most people just shut down, nod their head, bury their head in the computer and start typing away. And in a few months or a few years, they're looking for another job because they don't see any opportunity there. And that's going to be really costly. There's already a shortage of people in the workforce. Right? We're already seeing that. The generations coming up are smaller than the generations going out. So we are going to be losing a lot of this experience in the next 10 to 20 years that we aren't going to be replacing anytime soon. So we really have to find ways to tap into that experience knowledge, and we have to find ways for the older generation to see value in sharing that knowledge with younger generations.
Yes.
So that's something that most workplaces are going to fight with for quite some time.
Oh my goodness, yes. It's so relevant, so important to be able to preserve and pass down that knowledge and that wisdom. Perhaps it's not necessarily applicable in particular skills like we're talking about, computer programming or drop-down lists. However, there are so many other ways that we can gather collective wisdom that's useful in any particular task situation or task environment that we can. And I think that the first part of that exercise is to recognize the inherent value in all of the people who are on our team, all of the people who are a fit, if you will, for the role and the assignment itself, and excluding the age. Hey, look, if I've got someone for the next couple of years and we can download all of that amazing wisdom, or 5 years or 10 years, whatever that is. And as you said, most people stay in companies for much shorter duration. But even if you've got a culture to where people stay with you for many, many years, what a tremendous opportunity that you have among you to glean that wisdom. It's a treasure, and it's a treasure that we sometimes overlook. It's even there.
Yeah, we get so focused on our own stuff. And again, human nature, we focus on what affects us directly. We don't always take time to understand how others can help influence or improve upon that. As you were talking about this, there was a movie that came out a few years back, Robert De Niro, I think it was called The Intern.
Yeah, I remember
And so if you've seen that, for your audience who hasn't, maybe we're checking it out. I don't know if it's the best movie out there, but it was enjoyable to watch. And I think it really does highlight the difference between somebody who, in his case is definitely that baby boomer generation. And he's now in a tech company working with a bunch of young techie kids who in the beginning just see him as like an afterthought, because I guess the boss had decided that she was going to, fight this ageism and bring somebody in who has more experience. And over the course of the movie, you see where these younger kids now start learning from this guy on everything from relationships to how to communicate more effectively with people to how to do their jobs better. So to me, that's a good representation of what having somebody with more experience in your business can really do for you. They can fill the gaps that maybe that younger generation's going to assume in the beginning, but they're going to see value with over time.
Yeah, that's lovely. So if you're listening and even if they're not employed, your dad keeps coming by the office and you're like, oh my goodness, Dad, stop coming by the office because you're disrupting the flow. Maybe welcome a conversation, welcome a story, welcome some experience or some wisdom that can add a greater cohesion to the collective experience of the entire organization.
Those stories can often be good. I remember when my grandpa was alive, he would always tell these. He had a very colorful life. Now, some of that was probably embellishment, but at the same point, he had these stories he would tell. And I can remember hearing, it'd be the same stories over and over again, but they were still good. And he had a way of making them entertaining. So there's some entertainment value to it, but there's also some lessons to learn. And that's what you got to take away is, what is this person sharing with me and how do I apply that to what I do? Because maybe there's something in there that can make me a better person, can make me a better employee, can help me maybe in things like work-life balance or communication or family relationships. You never know what it's going to bring to the table.
You don't. And to maximize the value of the time and the relationships while we have them, because we don't know how long we will have them, whether it's a millennial or a Gen Z person you got working with you, or Gen Xer, or even a baby boomer. Everyone has inherent value, and it's a good practice to first seek that value and extract it for the benefit of yourself and everyone in the organization.
Yeah, we're all going to face challenges, especially in business, that we don't even know we're going to face yet.
That's right.
And it's going to take a collective brain power to solve some of those challenges when they come up. I mean, if you think about back to 2019, 2020, there were a lot of things we didn't know back then that we had to figure out. This platform we're on right now was in its infancy, and it exploded over the course of 2 years. It became the norm of how many of us communicated for that period of time. You never know what tomorrow's going to bring. And if you're not proactively prepared to deal with it, it's going to be very difficult to get over that hump, because there will be somebody else or some other business that's going to figure out a way to solve that problem. And if they solve it before you do, or solve it better than you do, well, that's obviously going to impact your lifestyle and your business. So we really have to look at what everyone brings to the table, seek out talents, cultivate those talents, find ways to work with some of the challenges or the weakness, or find ways to offset that. It's also about creating an environment that people want to show up to. Work is work. I don't think anyone goes out necessarily because they enjoy the idea of work, but that doesn't mean they can't enjoy work. If you make it challenging, if you do make it fun, if you celebrate your wins instead of criticizing all your losses, it can be a great environment that people want to be part of. This is why we see companies become employers of choice. People seek them out to work there versus the other way around, versus leaving. You want to create the employer choice. You want to be the place where everyone's going, hey, that's a great place to work. That place is cool. They value their employees. They will value me if I go there. And that's what I should strive for.
Wonderful. I love the way you put that. It's a great way to bring it in for a landing. And listening to the individuals you bring in, just think of the message you send when you say, hey, I'm not in the same generation as you are. However, I've taken the time to learn about how our generations are not only different, but how we share in the desire to have success and experience that works. And here are some of the things that I'd love to do to help you to experience that. Wow. I mean, that in and of itself is bonding, because people don't care what you know, of course, as you know this, until they know that you care. Dan, thanks for being on the show. Really
thanks
appreciate
for having me,
you.
Nate. I
And such
appreciate
great
it.
wisdom.